So we're talking about integration, specifically, we get a lot of requests from credit card companies and folks like that and how we can support that. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So one of the very first things to note is that the RecordLinc sync system is a plugin driven application. So we have a syncer, which is bound to a Dentrix plugin, a Dentrix Enterprise plugin, and likewise an Eaglesoft plugin. And this is how we get our information to and from the corresponding software and then back out to the internet. Now, in the case of a credit card application, you probably need to be communicating with a local device and that sort of thing, right? And so because of that, what you're going to need to do is you're going to take that plugin that we have already developed for communicating with Dentrix. And what we would do is we would take that plugin and put it inside of a different application rather than RecordLinc Sync. So we'd write a desktop application that would actually perform the communication, the UI, etc., for displaying and acquiring that credit card processing and so on. And then at the very end of that process, it's going to need to communicate with Dentrix to say, okay, let's write that information to Dentrix, or even likewise before that to say, let's select a patient from Dentrix so that I know how much to bill and so on, right? And then that would utilize the Dentrix plugin in order to actually write that information back. Now that said, the write back functionality inside of the Dentrix API is dependent upon your level of access. So of course, whomever is doing that is going to have to actually first gain access to those APIs through the Dentrix API partner program first. But presuming that you do have that access, then you should be able to go ahead and enter payments, adjustments as necessary within the Dentrix system. And you can do that all from that remote software, that desktop software on the local system. You could also potentially even take web payments and send those down to the client. And that would be something much similar to actually the way RecordLinc works itself currently today, where we would be taking web payments and then processing those back down through the system. And that way there wouldn't be as much restructure, but in any case, yeah.
Yeah, nice. All right, Martin. So what about with Eaglesoft and Dentrix Enterprise? Would those be things that we just have to address as they come up?
Yeah, so as far as Eaglesoft API, currently there is no functionality in their API for writing back any adjustments or payments. So those would be things that we would have to requisition from them first. And that said, I do know that Dentrix Enterprise was working on one, but I'm not sure where it currently stands. So again, it's really kind of a, if the API or if the vendor actually has that availability, then most certainly we can hook it up. And it's just a matter of designing that plugin in order to perform those communications.
We could also send data over, right? So you're not talking about, like, if they don't have to, like, let's say we did a manual step in there or something. I mean, obviously it could become a hassle, but what we could send the data out about what the payments are to some sort of third party. It's just the write back for it that's not available. So if all they need is to receive the data, then that would at least work for some sort of an outbound. Obviously there'd have to be some sort of manual piece there. So just thinking kind of how far we could take it. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, as far as that's concerned, we can most certainly utilize the plugin to gather information about the patients, how much they owe the doctors, and things along those lines, right? So we can easily go down that path and gather all the information about the billing, the past due requirements, and so on. The biggest concern point would be the actual write back itself, and depending upon the system, that may or may not be available. But as far as Dentrix is concerned, it is potentially available, but you do just have to have that specific access through the Dentrix Integrated Partner Program. So supposing that is granted, then absolutely we can write that information back.
One other question would be around what can we do in regards to the Dentrix button and how we might be able to offer something along the lines of, some other portals being opened up through the Dentrix button as an option for some of that as well. So if they wanted to process or they wanted to send something through the button, would
Right.
that be something we
So the Dentrix button is an example of a desktop application that is implementing these plugins. In fact, actually, it's exactly the interface it utilizes, is to take the existing Dentrix plugin, and it utilizes that in order to gain access to the Dentrix database. And this is using the Dentrix integrated button plugin. So what this is it just registers a button within the Dentrix software, and when it is clicked from the user side, so it is user invoked, when they press that button, it can tell us some information about who the active patient is, and a couple of details about them. And then using that information, we can go and query extra information and send that to wherever it needs to be sent. And of course, at that point, the information is gathered. It's just a question of where it needs to end up and what format it needs to be in. So depending upon your API and where that needs to go, most certainly that can be done, yes.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Martin.